In this podcast episode, Ben Shapiro discusses the potential impeachment of Vice President Kamala Harris, drawing parallels to the impeachment of former President Donald Trump. Shapiro argues that Harris has failed to fulfill her constitutional duties, particularly regarding the invocation of the 25th Amendment to address President Joe Biden's competency. He suggests that her inaction reflects a significant abdication of responsibility, especially given the Democratic Party's previous efforts to undermine Biden's candidacy. Shapiro revisits the impeachment of Trump in 2019, which centered around allegations that he pressured Ukraine to investigate the Biden family in exchange for military aid. He emphasizes that the core of the impeachment charges was the misuse of foreign policy for electoral gain. Fast forward to the current geopolitical climate, Shapiro argues that the Biden administration's handling of the Israel-Hamas conflict mirrors Trump's alleged misconduct. He points out that the administration is pressuring Israel to allow humanitarian aid into Gaza, threatening to withdraw military support if they do not comply. This, he claims, is a clear attempt to influence the political landscape ahead of the upcoming elections, akin to the charges brought against Trump. Shapiro highlights the ongoing war in Gaza, initiated by Hamas's attack on Israel, and critiques the Biden administration's foreign policy approach. He contrasts the administration's unwavering support for Ukraine with its more cautious stance towards Israel, suggesting that this inconsistency raises questions about their true motivations. He cites reports indicating that Hamas is misappropriating humanitarian aid, further complicating the situation. Shapiro argues that the Biden administration's threats to Israel are not genuinely about humanitarian concerns, but rather about political maneuvering as the election approaches. As the podcast progresses, Shapiro delves into Harris's campaign, noting her declining popularity and the desperate measures she is taking to regain support. He discusses her recent outreach efforts to black men, which he characterizes as paternalistic and indicative of her campaign's struggles. Shapiro critiques her proposals, such as forgivable loans for minority business owners and the legalization of marijuana, pointing out the contradictions in her past actions as California's Attorney General. Shapiro also addresses Harris's attempts to distance herself from the Biden administration's controversial policies, particularly regarding immigration and crime. He highlights her evasive responses during interviews, suggesting that she is attempting to navigate a politically charged environment without taking responsibility for the administration's failures. Throughout the podcast, Shapiro emphasizes the role of the media in shaping public perception of both Harris and Trump. He critiques the mainstream media's portrayal of Trump as mentally unfit, while ignoring Biden's evident cognitive decline. Shapiro argues that the media's double standards are detrimental to public trust and contribute to a broader narrative that undermines the integrity of political discourse. He also discusses the recent revisions to FBI crime statistics, revealing that violent crime actually increased in 2022, contrary to earlier reports. Shapiro expresses concern over the FBI's lack of transparency and the implications of these revisions for public trust in government institutions. Shapiro contrasts the economic strategies of Trump and Harris, highlighting the stark differences in their approaches. He critiques Harris's running mate, Tim Walz, for his lack of understanding of venture capitalism and economic principles. Shapiro argues that the Democratic Party's focus on envy and class warfare is detrimental to economic growth and innovation. In a segment discussing Trump's recent interview with Bloomberg, Shapiro notes Trump's pragmatic approach to economic policy, emphasizing his record of low inflation during his presidency. He argues that Trump's willingness to engage in adversarial interviews demonstrates his confidence and commitment to addressing the concerns of American voters. As the podcast concludes, Shapiro reflects on the precarious position of both Harris and Biden as they navigate a challenging political landscape. He suggests that Harris's attempts to reposition herself as a moderate may not be enough to salvage her campaign, especially as public sentiment shifts. Shapiro's analysis paints a picture of a vice president struggling to maintain relevance in a rapidly changing political environment, while also raising questions about the integrity of the Biden administration's policies and their implications for the upcoming election.